by now you may know me. Well, this is the Forgotten Corner, and this is the newest episode. We're talking about two films today. Two that I do not own, but I have seen, because I promised I would watch all of his movies. Let's have a talk about Kevin Smith. Now, I have already reviewed the Clerks animated series, and that's possibly the greatest TV show, to me at least. The series is definitely funny, definitely check it out. As I also mentioned, it was out of this region. So, UK follows, I'm sorry, but maybe Kevin will work on something if he's doing a second season. But, the Jade Silent Bob brand is basically interesting. Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma, Jane Silent Bob Strike Back, Jane Silent Bob Reboot, and then there's Clerks 2 as well. But during the time after Clerks 2, Kevin Smith kind of had a downfall. Zack and Mary Make a Porno wasn't a big hit. Cop Out was an absolute piece of trash. Then basically there was Red State, which I actually think is one of his better films, but that film didn't really do very well. So basically, due to this minor failures, Kevin Smith had to resort to making podcasts. And basically, one time when he was joking around on his podcast called Smallcast that I have been listening to, it's actually pretty good. He basically, in the episode Carpenter and the Walrus, this idea was Kevin Smith read something, a Craigslist ad, basically talking about, well, if you live in my house, you have to wear a walrus costume. Turns out the whole thing was fake, but Kevin Smith liked the idea and basically decided to write a horror film called Tusk. That's the film we will be reviewing today. These films are basically marked as Kevin Smith's worst. Tusk being basically just basically, it's possibly just like one of his weird, basically it was just Human Centipede. And basically that's all. And then basically there is Yoga Hosers, which is part of this trilogy that he's working on called the True North Trilogy. This whole entire trilogy is connected. There's Tusk, and there's Yoga Hosers, and finally, I'm excited for his newest one. It's called Moose Jaws. Basically Jaws, but with a moose. That's something I would really, really like to see. It's just one of those silly horror films. Thankfully, Kevin Smith has grown out of this and basically is now making films like Jane Silent Bob Reboot, and I have here that he's been wanting to do Clerks 3, and he's going to do a new film called Twilight of the Mallrats. And also, we're finally going to get another Killjoys here. So basically, Kevin Smith has been a long time directing, and basically this is exactly what he came up with. Tusk, in my opinion, is actually an okay film. Tusk is basically one of those weird horror films that you watch. The torture can freak out someone, or it could just be hilarious. It's like that kind of... Well, think of schlock. What kind of schlock did I watch? Okay, I can't really answer that, but still. But basically, that kind of crap, kind of horror films that Kevin Smith made was. This one was basically just like one of those films like Human Centipede, and plus the second one as well, and the third with Human Centipede. This is just Kevin Smith's version of that, but just with Justin Long turning into a walrus. This film is actually very interesting. It's sure got a lot of shit because basically it's someone getting turned to a walrus. Of course you're gonna get that. But I will recommend this film to anyone who genuinely loves horror films. Some of it may make you uncomfortable, but some of you may actually find it hilarious. So basically, yeah, definitely check it out. Yoga Hosers, which was basically the next film in this universe, starring Johnny Depp's daughter and Harley Quinn Smith, aka Kevin Smith's daughter. The film was basically slammed by critics, and I have to admit, this is possibly one of his worst films. But you can also look at it as some of those silly, crappy horror films that came out in the 80s. You could look at some of those silly and stupid horror films that came out around that time. There's some of the absolute garbage ones. And basically because it has something... It's kind of like The Gate a little bit like The Gate. But it's just really silly and stupid. But can you enjoy it if it was silly and stupid? Maybe for some people. I'll say that. Thankfully, this trilogy shall come to an end with the newest film called Moose Jaws. I am very excited for Moose Jaws because basically, by the sounds of it, it sounds pretty interesting. Jaws, but with a moose. And plus, I did enjoy Tusk, and I do have to admit, Yoga Hosers is just one of those crappy films. You can watch it when you're really drunk or high. Is probably how he wrote it. But yeah, just try and watch the films and basically see what you think. It's definitely a mixed bag. These films are no Citizen Kane or in horror standards. They're no like bloody Halloween or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're basically just pieces of crap, but they're enjoyable. Tusk is more thoughtful with its ideas. Howard Howe is more interesting of a character, and the performances are actually kind of good. Got the point as well, but Haley Joel Osment's kind of performance was a little bit stale. I will have to admit, definitely check out both of these films because these are pretty enjoyable. And trust me, you can probably find Tusk as an absolute crap because, well, basically, it's a guy getting turned into a walrus, but it's surgical. But I will say, basically, it's enjoyable for what it is. And Yoga Hosers is just a piece of crap that you can just watch when you're drunk. So, yeah, thank God Kevin Smith got back to what he was doing and went back to his roots. A lot of people were kind of mixed and didn't really feel like basically that Reboot was as good. I think it's because maybe Kevin changed during the time that Reboot came out. Reboot basically came out and, well, it was basically the new modern version of an old Kevin Smith film. If you watch Jane Silent Bob and then you watch Jane Silent Bob Reboot, they're very different. They're very different kind of films. One has got the classic Kevin in there, which is basically like the one that was done out. Now they've got the new one that basically was involved with everything. There's not really that many references to the original stuff. There is a few, but it's more got references to the Hollywood Babylon and basically the Smodcast stuff. I will say basically I think it's maybe because Scott isn't there, because Scott Moser was always his producer and I guess he couldn't get him back, maybe because he was kind of taking a break or he was working on. Scott Moser did direct The Grinch 2018 and plus he was working on Secret of Pets 2. But if Scott does return for the next film, known as Twilight of the Morvats, maybe Kevin could return back to his usual stuff, get back to what he was doing. So yeah, definitely, I hope that will happen. But definitely check out these silly films.
It's not finished. It's finished.